and I'll have to signal to get my PowerPoint going. So this is all a bit of a technical, it's an analog digital hybrid remix. We're just going to go, okay, so, this is sort of the theme of the talk at the moment. This is an illustration that Alexis Hunter is featured actually in the exhibition. It's a document that I've come across quite recently, and it seems to epitomize so much about why the slide collection exists in the first place. It's an invitation for artists to bring slides to the Hayward Gallery. I'm not sure it was particularly sort of organized by the Haywards so much as the women artists who were invited to participate. And I just love this image of a teeny tiny thing going into this beam that's going to be the projection that takes over the Hayward space. This sort of enaction of the slides going through is reminiscent of the, well, I'm inspired by this image that Lucy Lippard describes the ad hoc women's committee at a Whitney Biennale, and it should be other people, not just one, but three, inserting the work of women artists into this Whitney Biennale in 1970 in order to bring up the ratio of the artists to 50% at that time by projecting the work of women artists onto the Whitney itself. So this whole thing about projection and the role of slides in terms of raising the visibility of women artists is got. This image of Annabelle Nicholson's slide is a digital image taken with a Nikon SLR camera on the 27th of November 2016 at 18:59. I retrieved the artist's slide file and I placed it on a light table. Then I picked up the camera and examined the slides until I found one that I thought resonated with the idea of fire or ritual or primal forces. And it was amazing to watch the film just now, where these women are feeding this fire as if that was the conversation, the energy of that moment. And I'm also very grateful to Laure Mulvey earlier for describing or reminding us that obsolescence, and these are, the slide is an obsolete communication tool, having a revolutionary energy that can be reactivated. I photographed the slide, making sure the image was lit and that the inscription on the slide mount was legible. The photograph of the slide has its own unique genesis, but it enacts the work of the labor, effort, whatever, of Annabelle Nicholson. And when I say work, I'm not only referring to the artwork, but to the care and time she dedicated towards producing this mounted, labeled 35mm slide, and to the labor or the effort that ensured that its presence is in the Women's Art Library collection. I'm showing this image to introduce how I use a camera to expose the work of collection digitization as a cultural process. Or, to put it more simply, how I pick up the camera and use it to explore the Women's Art Library slide collection as an action and not an archive. I call my action of photographing the slide collection slide walking. Now, that first image you saw of me was a collaboration with an artist who had created a series of costumes for curators. She would, and I was one of the curators that she chose to work with. The costume was designed after she had interviewed me and sort of determined what my interests were, or what the nature of my work is with the collection. And my obsession with the slides made her turn me into this kind of, my head is in a slide, it's a very sci-fi kind of image, and I'm raising through the pinkishness that slides turn into when they start to deteriorate. And anyway, I'm sort of raising out the patriarchal dominance of most teaching slide collections where women figure very minimally. Now, slide walking is my the practice that is informing my doctoral research, and it enables me to record my reading hundreds of artist slides. So this was me fooling around with PowerPoint, inserting just a section of a folder of images, and they just get organized in this weird kind of layered way. The thing about what I discovered about taking images of slides in their entirety is that artists write on slides. Artists wrote on every single slide. A slide without an inscription was a lost slide. But when I reproduce even the most annotated slide as a digital object, I'm haunted by the question of how this image will be read, let alone found in the future, as slide collections, the physical collections, are destroyed or they deteriorate. And as a lot of people know, teaching slide collections have been literally put into dumpsters in the last 10 years or so, since 2004, when Kodak announced that they weren't going to produce any more slide projectors or support that kind of operational system. So how will these slides continue to speak on behalf of the artist? The image and the inscription on the slide mount are very much bound together. I selected this double-page spread from a book called The Gorgeous Nothings, which is by Martha Werner, who's a scholar of Emily Dickinson poems, and Jen Bergen, who is an artist that she worked with. This is really, really faint, but that's okay. You'll see what Jen Bergen's contribution is in a second. For me, this particular poem, of course, will conjure Annabelle Nicholson's Fire film. On the left is the facsimile of one of Emily Dickinson's late poems, alongside Jen's drawing that retains the relationship of the text to the paper fragment it's inscribed on. This book shows how Emily Dickinson materialized her late poems through the space and surface of selected fragments of envelopes and wrappers. The drawings record the poet's visual spatial play, and her precision is reenacted by the artist. This attentiveness to how writing performs the space it occupies informs my fascination with artists' slides. Now, the majority of the slides in the Women's Art Library collection came directly from the artists. They mostly document the artwork near where it was produced rather than situated in exhibitions. Apart from this one, which shows Isaac in an exhibition of her work. I love this image. It's just one way. The way when you project that actual slide, when you see the slide as it was meant to be projected, it's like you're wandering into this garden, you're drawn into this strange space along with the sculptures. But as a slide annotated, it's very much held in that her own inscriptions and her own name. So some of these images celebrate the presence of the artist, as in the image you saw of Isaac Tutsuner with her artwork, or a sense of how personal space was transformed by the artist's practice. And I love this image too for the fact that the artwork is obviously propped up on the gate of the house. And Beth Higgins is finding the only space that she can in probably a smallish bedroom It's okay, don't stop it. And this image here, yeah, it looks like she's come out onto a patio and just set up the painting wherever she could sort of find some light. The 35mm slide routinely conducted the artwork from the artist's space into the public realm. But when artists sent slides to the Women's Art Library, they were taking part in a feminist project that aimed to change that public space and raise the visibility of women's art practice. They were gathered from approximately 1,300 artists, and the slides remain together today. They represent the bygone power of the slide as an information technology. They also represent the fleeting moment when feminist slide registries were established internationally as an empowering strategy for women artists in the 70s and 80s. But what else do these particular slides represent besides the artwork? The action I can show today, thanks to digitization, is the artist's writing and inscribing, and there's a lot of it. It both shapes our experience of the artwork and is shaped by the slide's mount. They were not meant to be seen, these mounts, as you can see when you're looking at these slides here, which look very clean. They look, it's almost like a kind of publishing to be able to project your slides. Artists wrote over, under, and around the image, securing it with their own names, dates, dimensions, and other kind of metadata that we associate with digitized images today. And as I photographed the slide box, I could see how the artist's laborious slide labeling was a handwritten statement that was repeated across every single slide to the point where some almost give up. But even that single letter placed on the slide mount becomes eloquent in the context of a collection dedicated and formed out of the women's art practice. The slide files are connected through a reproductive labor, but the collective voice they iterate is only now being explored. Claire Gasson and Holly Pester are two artists that I've been very privileged to work with, and they both created new work by engaging directly with the text of the Women's Art Library. This is a slide of Claire Gasson's score. In 2011, Claire transformed the combined databases of all the names of every artist represented in the collection into a performance for voice called The River. And this is just a very close-up of the annotation that one of the voice performers made on one of the, I have a set of these scores in the collection today. In 2013, Holly Pester approached the collection through artists' inscriptions across different forms, from posters to letters, teasing out the unguarded stories being whispered rather than said. But nonetheless, they were speaking very powerfully on behalf of the women who make up the Women's Art Library collection. And this is just an excerpt from the back of Holly's book, which was published by Bookworks. And the title of the book is Go to Reception and Ask for Sarah in Red Felt Tip. So this is the slide I showed earlier with the image reinstated. So of course these slide labels were going to start to resonate as more than data accompanying these images. They read back as an act of self-assertion and affirmation. The layer of text that, for instance, Kim Valdez has framed her slides with add up to 166 words. I can look across this stretch of physical inscription and I can see that it has its own syntax. It's some kind of rhythm, like the lyrics of a work song, that becomes maybe more obvious when I lift it off the slide mount and digitally reconstitute it as a projection of text. This was what I wrote on the top of my Word document. And then the next thing. And this is set at a credit roll setting in PowerPoint. And although these words are not crafted into poetry, the words are crafting the slides. And this is a kind of artist writing that shapes how the artist experiences her own practice. And this is another way that the slide actually performs. So Alexis Hunter endures as one of the most organized self-documenting artists that I know. And the program that Rose English mentioned, that DAX has started, where they're offering funding for artists and the estates of artists to organize their archives. I was so thrilled to be able to help the estate of Alexis Hunter secure some of that funding so that this secures the archive of Alexis in the future. The Women's Art Library is safekeeping her uncatalogued slide collection at the moment on behalf of her estate. It's not a donation so much as a gesture of trust. There's no documentation around this body of archives in our collection. I should probably have said that I'm not a qualified archivist, I'm not much of a librarian, I'm just somebody who ended up looking after this collection at Goldsmiths because I worked with the organization that the Women's Art Library was before. In these scruffy ring binders, the 35mm slides are intricately bound with written notes and photographs, and for me, they continue to perform something of Alexis's practice. The slide is not a representation of artwork alone. It's an artist's production, an artist's information communication tool. It is a photographic object that is performative. It's a hybrid text, and as I come towards the end of my own doctoral research, I'm beginning to see how the Women's Art Library slides, this feminist collection, takes this mundane photographic object into a post-digital future form or space where the politics of visuality point to a politics of digitization. Very much that becoming and staying visible is an action. So just sitting, should be a little bit darker, but sitting in a darkened room, making images appear as a collective consciousness-raising kind of work was done by women artists, and that's how they performed their own work. Today we are participating in that politics by looking at these slides, but also the exhibition itself. But my research was driven by a sense that the institution was failing the slide collection, or put another way, that the slide collection needed to be recognized as a counter-institution. Its situation as an archive of a past feminist project suggests that its future use will depend and evolve to serve an academic community with an ever-shifting and unreliable conviction in feminism. But here is a material collection. There's over 47 feet of packed slide files produced by women artists. And it's a physical presence that speaks to the image overload that digital network spaces impose. My caretaking work with the Women's Art Library means that I negotiate this mass of images routinely, retrieving slides for researchers, scanning on demand, rehousing them in more up-to-date archival storage. And yes, I'm adding to the collection. Whenever artists are clearing their workspaces, or their mothers' workspaces, or their daughters' workspaces, they will ask me, Do you still want slides? Slides? But of course the answer is yes. Of course I can't say no. This continues to be a feminist collective project, and this collection is in the process of becoming. It is yet to come fully into view, and it's a matter of recognition and consolidating a feminist subjectivity. This slide collection shows us how to read knowingly and politically. Thank you.